Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to Creation Conversations once again. It's just me and our good friend Dr. Diane this evening because John is well, he was just a few hours ago slightly stuck in a large sort of flooded Australia. He was right out in the sticks in the middle of Queensland, visiting some old friends, and I spoke to him last night and he said, I've got to try and make my drive back, and there's been flooding and there's been dams bursting and there's been bogged down cars and everything, right? So he said, I'm not sure I'm going to make it in time for the broadcast. So he is safely home, which is good. It's taken him about 12, 14 hours of traveling to actually get home. So we've sort of let him off for one night and he's getting some well-earned rest. So it's myself and Diane. How are you doing, Diane?
I'm well, thanks, Joseph. Good to talk to you
Good,
and to
good,
the
good.
rest of whoever's watching.
Yeah, we've got a few people already signing in. So hello, the chat's going. I've got
Oh,
no
good.
Sam here tonight either. So we're sort of looking after ourselves tonight. So who knows what will happen, because we've already had an interesting time trying to get us both here. It's been a fairly hectic and busy day for me, doing lots of different stuff, including trying to repair damage to the office roof and all the leaks and everything that has been coming. So hopefully we've sorted that, at least for the time being. It's the first clear and sunny day we've had in well over a week and a bit. So that's been quite good today. What's the weather like down in Canberra? Is it quite as wet as where John is?
No, it's not nearly as wet as where John is, but we did have a very stormy couple of days yesterday and the night before, and a lot of trees were knocked down around the place, and the people who have to go and clear the roads and clear up the debris have been very busy. But this morning, it's morning in Australia. It's clearer. It's cloudy, but there are patches of blue sky, which is always welcome.
Good stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's been, like I say, the first nice day in quite a while here in the UK. Anyway, right, we're going to do something a little bit different today because we did have a whole elaborate plan for this week's Creation Conversations, which didn't really work out due to a number of different reasons. But we will get the guest who we're thinking of having on this week on in a future episode, probably in the new year, and we've got a whole big plan for the new year as well. But today, what we thought we'd do is a couple of different things. One of the things that came out this week was actually this here, the Creation Research News, or we call it the Evidence News. I mean, it tells you a little bit about creation research. You've got a wonderful little picture of the brand new sheds that have just gone up at Jurassic Ark, which have been wonderful. I've not been to Jurassic Ark for nearly 3 years now. In fact, over 3
Yes,
years
that'd
now.
be right.
It's 2018, and it was amazing when I went there before. So I'm really looking forward to when Australia lets me back in, so I can go and see it again.
Yes.
So it's got some
Well, we
nice.
will welcome you back, and you will really enjoy the things that we've excavated.
Oh,
And
I'm
I can
really looking
assure you
forward to
from
it.
personal experience, having those covers there makes it so much easier for the people working, but it also protects the fossil site. So we
Yes,
can
yeah,
go ahead with a
yeah.
lot more excavating, and we're finding some brilliant things. And there are some photos there
Yeah,
in the newsletter. Yes.
there's some really nice stuff. I highly recommend, by the way, everybody gets signed up to this newsletter because it's really well worth getting not just the news from Creation Research, and there is a lot of news, including, if you look down the bottom here, some wonderful finds from the Isle of Wight that I've been reporting on. But it also, and this is one of the things that really impressed me about Creation Research when I first started getting involved with Creation Research, it has the evidence stuff in it as well. I mean, we've got two main topics here. One of them's about two dinosaurs from Italy. The other one's about some nice footprints as well. Those are going to be what we're going to be chatting about tonight predominantly. But I mean, I'd been following John Mackay for a while, right, and Creation Research. But when I first met John Mackay personally, it was at a big conference, right? And I went in and I sat down. It was the first time I was listening to him in person, right? And he stood up and he presented his talk using a piece of evidence that had been presented in the very prestigious journal Nature that morning. and he had slides and everything. And now that I'm involved with the inner workings of creation research, I'm sure that you, Diane, had something to do with creating those slides, because John had been all over the place that morning, so I
Yeah.
don't think he had time to do it all himself. But not only does it
Yes, I
show
made
you,
quite a lot of the slides.
yeah,
Mm,
not only does it
mm,
show you how some of the inner workings and
mm.
how smoothly everything has to run inside creation research, but it also shows you how up to date this research and this evidence really is. And it really is the same with the evidence news. It comes out every couple of weeks, sometimes sooner than others. Is that right, Diane? Every so often?
Well, we aim for every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's every 3 weeks, depending on what else is happening with the ministry work. But we usually aim for every fortnight. Mm.
Yeah, it's fairly regular, and it doesn't just let you know what's been going on in creation research. It also keeps you nice and up to date with all of the evidence, the recent reports, stuff that you may have heard in the news, in the media, in on the telly or whatever. And it gives you a nice biblical perspective as well as reporting the actual facts there. And it's 100% free. Is that right, Diane?
Yes, it's free. You just sign up on the main creation research site. There's a page there you can sign up, and you'll
Yeah,
just get it as an
absolutely.
email every couple of weeks whenever it comes out.
Let's see if we can get
Yeah.
a nice website up for. No, there's no website up here. Surely there must be. Oh well, this isn't. There we go. I'll put this up for you there. It's not. This is not. You're not available to stream or DVD or e-news. But if you go to the website there, creationresearch.net, it's nice and simple. You'll be able to sign up. Just click on newsletters
Yes, there's a
and
link there.
updates.
Mm,
There's a nice link there. It's nice and
mm.
straightforward. It's completely free, and you get some nice up-to-date information as well. And there's two things in particular that we're going to be talking about here. We've got two Italian dinosaurs, but before we get onto that, Diane, I thought we could start by talking about this article here, which says about no bears at Letoli, and I think this is mostly about. Is it about bear footprints? What's going on here? What's the thing
It's
about bears?
partly about bare footprints, but there's a bit of background to that. Laetoli is a place in Tanzania, and back in the mid 1970s, Mary Leakey, who you may have heard of, she is the mother of Richard Leakey, actually. So the Leakey family have been involved in fossil digging out in Africa for generations. They found some footprints. And they were quite intrigued by these footprints because they were very, very human-like. But there was a bit of a problem for the evolutionists because this particular rock layer that they were found in, it's a layer of volcanic ash that's been solidified and then buried. That rock layer had been dated as 3.6 million years old. Now, according to the evolutionary timetable for when humans emerged onto the Earth, that is too early for modern humans. But these footprints were distinctively human-like.
Mm-hmm.
So the evolutionists stuck to their beliefs about the evolutionary timetable, and they said, well, these footprints have to be made by some kind of human ancestor. Now, the most popular choice for the relevant human ancestor in their sequence is a fossil that everyone's heard of called Lucy, otherwise known as Australopithecus afarensis. Now, there were no fossils of this particular creature found there. Those were found sort of hundreds of kilometres away. But But because they refused to believe that these were human footprints, they assigned them to what they called hominins, which is a general term for human ancestors. Australopithecine afarensis is just one particular species. There's a whole plethora of these that have been found in various sites in Africa. And of course, whenever you find a new fossil, you like to make it into a new species and name it after yourself, and they've certainly done
Sure.
that with these so-called human ancestors. But the prints were very human-like, and several people, including scientists who have studied them, have said, look, we could find these on the beach today. Now, you might not find them on the beach in England because it's too cold to walk on the beach.
Nobody's going barefoot on the beaches of England today. No,
no, but you certainly do in Australia.
Yeah,
you see,
we get the point.
Lots of footprints on the beach. And the interesting thing about footprints on the beach is that they don't last very long. The next wave just washes them away. Yeah. So if you're going to preserve some fossil footprints, you have to do that quickly. Now that's an interesting issue we might get onto later on. But if we just get back to the actual shape and structure of these footprints, that they are very human-like. So how did bears get into this story? Well, there were several trackways of these footprints. The ones that were reported back in the 1970s, and then they've been studied over and over again. They were at one particular site, and they're very, very clear.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any photos of these footprints, Diane? Have you got any
yes, I do actually have a photo.
Shall I put the slides up so people can
yes,
have a
thank
look?
you. Yes,
do that.
Yes,
there
we are.
Go.
That's some of the footprints from the main site, and as you can see, they do look like someone just walking in sand across the beach. Now,
if you go down to your PowerPoint,
I just go to my slideshow. Anyway, as I was saying, that this isn't the only trackway. This is the clearest trackway, and it's the most detailed in study. And each time they've studied it, they have affirmed these are amazingly human-like footprints, but they are still, in general, assigned to Australopithecines. Just let me see if I can get my slides to advance. Here we go. Now, these are the new footprints that were reported in our newsletter. Now, they were found at the same time as the as those ones I've just shown you in the other sites in this general area. But because they weren't as clear, they weren't as closely studied. But recently they have been closely studied, and the more colourful panel down the bottom is where they've done some 3D scans of these. You can do all sorts of wonderful computer scans these days to really study the three-dimensional shape of them. Now, because they weren't as clear, one of the suggestions was that they were made by bears. Now, I don't know about you, but why would you think that? Well, in fact, bears can walk on two legs occasionally for just a few short steps. And they will leave a triangular footprint, but it's much more triangular than these. But anyway, because that suggestion was floated, some scientists actually decided, well, all right, we'll test that out. And they did. At a bear sanctuary in North America, they managed to persuade some bears to walk in some soft mud, enough to leave footprints. And they compared them with these footprints. And they found that, of course, bears do not have a big toe and a whole lot of little toes. They have some much more evenly sized toes. And these look nothing like bear prints. So, and even the evolutionists thought, well, it wasn't a terribly good theory. But good on these scientists for actually checking this out. So we'll give them credit for that. But anyway, these prints are... They're a bit wider, but they are definitely human-like, and you can see the sort of the basis of a big toe there, particularly in the computer-generated ones. And I've got a closer pictures here from the original research paper that's recently been published. Now, Site G is the site that's been extensively studied. And they're the ones that are very distinctively human-like, and you can see that on the left-hand side of the photo. Site A is this site that was not as clear, that weren't studied as much, and this theory about, well, maybe they were made by bears has come up, but they've now been studied. Now you can see that they are wider and not as clear. But if we go back to the previous slide, if I can just get there we go. Now, there's an interesting thing about this trackway. It's obviously been made by a two-footed creature, but if you look at it, you've got one foot in front of the other, almost crossing over. And that is a gait, that is as in a style of walking, that bears can't do, even if they can walk on 2 feet, and neither can apes. So all of this evidence, and that is important, the actual evidence points to human-like footprints in a human-like gait. That's a style of walking. Now, if you can imagine someone who's picking their way over uneven ground through wet volcanic ash and maybe slipping a bit, all of that could be accounted for by this style of footprints. So assigning these to completely modern human footprints is not a problem if you're looking at the actual evidence, whether it be the Site G prints, that's the ones that have been extensively studied, and these Site A prints, which have only just recently been studied. But because the evolutionists are locked in to their evolutionary timetable, they're just not going down that way. And so what they decided was, well, these ones we've just studied now at Site A look different to the other ones, so it must have been made by a different hominin. So they keep on inventing more and more of these hominins, even though there are no fossil bones, no fossil foot bones at this site, and no fossil hominins anywhere. Now, if you want a bit of background about the Laetoli footprints, we have 3 different articles about them, which will help put together the story there. You might like to go to our fact file. What we do with our science reports in the newsletter, we archive them because they become a useful resource for people doing research. So they're archived individually on the creation fact file, and you can search for them just using a keyword search. If you go to the fact file, just put in Laetoli, you'll get several articles that will give you a bit more of the background. Now, if you're interested in human evolution in general, or the hominin fossils and the supposed human ancestors, there are several questions about that on our question and answer site, so that might help fill in the story for you. So, Joseph, if we can go back to just the chat now.
Sure, if you just click on stop sharing, that should sort all that out, and it should bring you back
I can do that. Here we go. Come on, computer.
Hopefully brings you back to me.
Yes, so, indeed. Right, there we are. I've turned that off, so we should be back to the chat now. So there's as Joseph said, one of the things we like to keep up to date with what's being reported out there in the general scientific news, so that we know what people are being told, so we can then help people to understand what was actually discovered, help them sort out the difference between the actual discovery and the story that's being told about it, and then help people to put it into a biblical perspective. Because sometimes people think, well, how do I understand this from the point of view of biblical history? Because sometimes it just doesn't quite seem to work, because most of the general news reports, like from the BBC or the ABC or things like that, always report the evolution first, and because they're determined to keep it within that worldview. So we try to do that and report on the things that we know that people are being bombarded with out there.
It's a fascinating sort of study it was done. I mean, what is the problem with them being human footprints? Human is in the sense of how we think of humans today, like modern humans. Right? As far as the evolutionists are concerned, what's the problem with them classifying it as human? Is it purely just an age thing, or is there actually any other evidence that would perhaps throw issue on them being human footprints? Or did they purely look at the age and say, there's no way, this is far too old, there's no way these can be humans, we'll try and just put them down as bear, and when that doesn't work, we'll just make up a hominid for them to basically be. Is that really what we're looking at here?
Yes, that's their basic problem. There aren't any fossil bones at this site. It's just footprints. So there's no evidence of modern humans in terms of bones there. By the 1970s, it was well and truly established in people's minds that these Australopithecines were somehow human ancestors. Now, whether they were direct lines or not, the evolutionists argue amongst themselves. You might like to look up a question about so-called common ancestors. But that site has been dated as 3.6 million years old. And as far as they're concerned, that is too early for modern humans to be at this site. So they really are stuck in that evolutionary timetable.
Sure. So you also one last question about the footprints there. It says that it's I'm just reading from the evidence news here that it's found in a layer of solidified volcanic ash. Do you know anything? Because I know a little bit about, because they are obviously fossils, so I know a little bit about the sort of fossil side of things. But have you got any comments from, like, I mean, a classic example would be Pompeii, right, where you've got your sort of not really fossil humans, but kind of fossil cavities where the humans were, and that ash completely obliterated anything biological, any humans at all, and you're just left with a kind of a shell which you pour plaster of Paris down and end up with your sort of fossil human cast. Could these humans have been destroyed from the volcanic ash, or is this likely something that they've walked through when it's not hot enough to kill, but still sort of warm enough to hold the footprint? Do you know anything about that from the site?
Well, either of those things could be true. Certainly, volcanic ash does, or volcanic explosions certainly destroy things. It's also possible that this was a layer of freshly formed volcanic ash that then cooled down and was wet, and human beings were sort of picking their way across it. So it could be either of those things. But whatever it is, it had to be formed quickly. You cannot form fossil footprints slowly. And these are not the only fossil footprints there are in the world. And there are lots of fossil footprints, not only of humans, but also of animals. And you would know a bit about that. So this is another good piece of evidence that fossilization is a rapid process. And for trace type fossils like this, where you've got imprints of either feet or of skin impressions or things like that, they have to be formed quickly and preserved quickly. In other words, covered up quickly. So we're talking about rapid processes, not slowly and gradual processes.
No, for sure. This is a very, very rapid thing. Sort of off the back of that, there's actually just had a question come in from Jim. I'll just put it up on the screen here. A few different questions there, and I'm happy to comment on some of this as well, because we're looking at it again more from perhaps a geological point of view. But you start perhaps with the first one. What size are the footprints, and how were they formed? So we've just talked about how they were formed, right? This is a volcanic ash, and it was a quick preservation. But what kind of size are we looking at for these footprints? Are these sort of normal human sized?
Well, there are a number of trackways, and they are various sizes. The ones that have been most studied and that the first photo I showed you comes from a site where there are a number of trackways, and there are a few different sizes. So the story is it's probably a small adult and maybe some children or youths that, from the depth of the impressions and the general size, that they'd say it was somebody who was certainly less than 5 feet tall, but certainly well within the human range for a small human.
Sure. Okay. And then you've got these other questions here about is this a post-flood deposition? Is this a flood? I would say it was certainly is a post-flood deposition.
Yes, it would be post-flood.
Yeah. If you look at volcanic deposits that we would attribute to the flood, they are normally very big, right? I'm
Yeah.
talking like the North Atlantic igneous province, which is the same
Mm,
basalt sequence or the Thulian sequence that
mm,
the Grand Canyon is part. Not the Grand Canyon, sorry, the Giant's Causeway is part of. So you've got the Giant's Causeway in Northern
mm.
Ireland, and then if you go up to the Isle of Staffa, and you go off to it even shows up in Iceland as well, like this huge basalt, which is a volcanic rock, huge basalt
Mm.
column. It produces these wonderful sort of hexagonal geometric
Yeah.
kind of shapes, right? Absolutely
Mm,
beautiful, absolutely wonderful. But that is a volcanic deposit, and it is on an
mm,
enormous scale. In fact, if you've seen our documentary Fire and Ice, we actually talk a little bit about the Thulian deposit, or the North Atlantic
mm,
basalt sort of sequence there, and it is phenomenal, and some of the
mm.
geology is incredible. This is, from my understanding anyway, Diane, a fairly localized deposit, a fairly localized volcanic deposit where
Yes.
these
Yeah.
footprints are found. Yeah.
Mm.
So the volcano was most likely formed during Noah's flood. So
Yeah.
anything that
Mm.
came out of it would certainly be after Noah's flood.
Yes.
So I
Mm.
doubt they could be one of the prints of one of the 8 on Noah's Ark after the flood,
No.
mainly
No.
because these are found in
Mm.
Italy. Is that right?
Mm. Sorry, they were found.
These are in found in Italy. Is that right? Which
No,
no,
the Laetoli footprints. No,
yeah, where are they?
they're in Tanzania in Africa.
Tanzania. That's
Um,
right. Sorry,
yeah, yes,
it's the Italian
yeah.
dinosaurs.
So
We're coming on to them in
they're
a minute. Yeah,
post flood. After Noah's flood, there was a lot. There's been a lot of instability, and there's been
mm,
volcanic activity from then to now. It's still going on now. Um,
sure.
so it would have been a much more localized eruption, leaving a layer of ash. After Noah's flood and after the Tower of Babel, people migrated all over the world, of course, and that's an interesting story in itself. So people did migrate down into Africa. So I'd say that they were the people who were migrating down
Mm.
through Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think we will
Mm,
we will definitely need to do. I mean, we did our presentation last week, the One Blood Many
mm,
Races, where we looked at, and that was really well received, and then we've had some good feedback from that. So thank you very
mm.
much, and everybody who's been following that as
Yes.
well.
Mm,
And I think we definitely need to do a sort of a migratory
yes.
presentation, because obviously John's been all over the world interviewing the native
Mm,
tribes and people and speaking to them, so he's got a fascinating story and background there, and obviously you can
yes.
bring in the genetics and we can have a bit of look at the
Mm,
geology as well. So yeah, I definitely think we should do that. That's one to put down for the new year. Let me just stick this footprint up on the
mm,
screen. This is actually one of it's not a human footprint by any stretch of the imagination.
mm,
This is a dinosaur footprint. You can kind of just about see the three toes on it, 1, 2, 3. It's a nice one that we were able to collect and actually
mm,
bring back with us from the Isle of Wight. So
mm,
yes, you find lots of fossils throughout the fossil record, from all different kinds of animals and stuff. But the one thing we
mm,
know for sure is that they were formed very quickly. And it fascinates me as well, this whole thing of the only reason why these couldn't be hominid footprints from the perspective of a evolutionist anyway, is simply because it doesn't fit their time scale. And it shows you really that a lot of the time they're not interested in the evidence. They're actually only interested in what fits with their theory or what fits with their current thinking, and it has to fit in with their timeline. And we'll do a little bit of a talk a bit later, perhaps, if we have some
mm,
time, of looking at Charles Lyell and sort of the history of this, sort of
yes.
where did this idea of deep time
Mm,
sort of actually come from. All right. Well, carrying on through the evidence news, which, by the way, if you've joined us recently, you can sign up for this for free. Just go to creationresearch.net and you'll see a link. You'll also see a little update about some of the work we're doing, as well as evidence
mm,
news. Starboy, brand new book, which I believe should be arriving in Australia very shortly, if it isn't already there. We've got our own copies here in the UK already, very limited edition. We do not have very many of these this year, so it's a great book to do for Christmas, a great book to, lovely comic book style, brilliant artwork. Steve,
mm.
who does our artwork, is a very,
Yeah,
very
he's
talented
brilliant. Yeah,
artist.
he really is.
Really,
Yes.
really good, and it's really
Mm,
fun as well, and there's lots of action, lots of
mm,
adventure, and you get to follow this young boy as he travels
mm,
around um, Israel and ends up, of course, meeting Jesus Christ. So a great story as well in there that you should really check out. And you can find that actually in the UK and in the USA. We can actually ship around the world from our UK site. It's fairly inexpensive, but do check out our UK site, creationresearchstore.com, because not only can you get the Starboy book from there, creationresearchstore.com, but you can also, we're doing together some fossil packs, so you can see our What Happened to the Dinosaur book there, which you also get along with a few nice fossils there, so perfect for Christmas presents. This, by the way, is sort of suitable for ages 8 to 13. This one's suitable for ages 2 to 7. The Who Made All the Dinosaurs colouring in sheets and everything in there, plus your fossil pack. And we've also got the Rocks Cry Out, Charmouth and Black Ven, which is a really great field book and great research in there. So you get a mixture of fossils with them as well. So go and check out the creationresearchstore.com and get some great resources for Christmas. All right.
Yes.
Let's move on to the another article that was talked about in the evidence news. Before we move on to, I'll do a little bit about the history of geology, but this ties in quite nicely to it, actually. Meet Bruno and Antonio, two Italian dinosaurs. Let's see if we can get it into focus. There they are, just there on our Creation Research newsletter update. Bruno and Antonio, two Italian dinosaurs. And it says here, an international group of scientists researching this fossil site in northeastern Italy have found the remains of the biggest and most complete dinosaur ever found in the country. This specimen, nicknamed Bruno, along with smaller specimen named Antonio, have been identified as a type of hadrosaur or a duck-billed dinosaur, and the researchers claim that there are at least 7, possibly 11 individuals of this species at the site. And they did some great sort of study and looking into the sort of microscope and stuff as well. But is there anything significant about this find that you found, Diane, sort of going through what these discoverers had found, what these researchers had found? Is there anything in particular that sort of stood out as being good evidence, hence why you included it in the evidence news?
Well, one of the interesting things is what else was found with these fossils, and that's something that's not always highlighted when they report these particular fossils in the mainstream scientific news. But sometimes you'll find these throwaway lines or a bit of background about the geology and the site of what else they found at this site. And they found plants and fish and crustaceans. It was a real mixed deposit of both land and sea creatures, and they sort of just jump over that, and most of the article, of course, is about describing these particular dinosaurs, and they're very good finds.
And it's an exciting find.
Yes, that's right. The biggest one was about 4 meters long, which is far from the biggest dinosaur that's ever been found in the world. But at the same time, think about what it takes to bury something that's 4 meters long, plus maybe 10 of his friends, well enough to be preserved, plus all of these other things, these bits of fish fossils and seashells and plants, and what sort of event is going to bury something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually says here in the article here, as well as dinosaurs in the fossil deposit, this deposit also contains exquisitely preserved small crocodiliforms, so crocodiles basically, or alligators of some description, pterosaur bones, so that's your flying, we'll call them flying dinosaurs because that's what most people know them as. They're technically flying reptiles. Like I say, fishes, several crustaceans, so your seashells and your arthropods and stuff, crabs and whatnot. Rare coprolites, that's fossil poo to you and I, pollen, of course, from flowers, and algae. So you've got a really, really mixed environment. And when I was going through university, one of the big things that they taught me, doing paleobiology, which is you go out, you dig up your deposit, and you work out from the fossils that you're digging up an ecosystem, right? So if you go and you find it's lots of terrestrial, exotic creatures and plants, then it's a terrestrial exotic environment, right? If you find it's lots of sort of shallow marine creatures, then it's a shallow marine environment, deep marine creatures, deep marine environment, or a desert or whatever, right? And something that I figured on very quickly, especially having a lot of experience in the field, and that's something that's been incredibly useful as my time doing research and as I move into further academic research as well. It's something that I'm really trying to bring to the table, because it's all great going and doing your lab work and looking through microscopes and stuff, and that's good, that's really important. But most of the time when we're studying dinosaurs, particularly if we're doing something like, say, for instance, soft tissue in dinosaur bones, there is very little sedimentological data, as in how was this bone found, what was it found with, how was it preserved, what was it buried with, what shape was the dinosaur in right when it was buried, because that's important, because the shape that the dinosaur is in indicates whether it died naturally and just got buried up, or whether it was drowned, right? So all this stuff is really, really important. And so often these reports either don't have that kind of information, or if they do have that kind of information, they just gloss over it, as in, oh, here's what we found. Now let's get on to the exciting stuff, right? What we found digging up and putting under the microscopes and stuff. Whereas really the big picture is so important in looking at how this creature was buried, how this creature was fossilized, how why it was so well preserved, right? And so the fact that you're finding all these things mixed together, one thing I came to a conclusion very quickly is you simply cannot just go to a rock face, go to a cliff face, go to a deposit, dig up fossils and say, oh, this is a terrestrial environment, this is a marine environment, because it's just a mess. It's just a big mess, right? I mean, two relatively decent sized dinosaurs buried with fish, buried with crocodiles, buried with flying creatures, buried with, sort of ones that are shallow marine creatures, buried with flowers. It is just a mess. It's a big flood. And I think that's the key thing. It's the fact that when you find these two things mixed together, you're definitely looking at evidence for a flood. Terrestrial creatures and sea creatures and terrestrial plants and sea plants all mixed together, you're looking at a flood. And I like to remind people that, the definition of a flood is water being where water shouldn't be. So if your kitchen tap bursts and it goes over onto your floor, your kitchen floor, right, you've had a flood in the kitchen, right? Water belongs in the sink, not on the floor. If John Mackay tries driving home from Queensland and the dam has burst and the water is flooding over the road, right, it's a flood because the water belongs in the dam and not on the road. So when you're looking for evidence of a flood, you're looking for evidence of water being where water shouldn't be. Right? Now, if you find fish which live in the water buried next to a dinosaur which lives on the land, buried next to a massive, 80-foot tall tree, which also lives on the land, well, I'm pretty sure I have yet to find somebody who believes that the fish evolved the capability of flight to go flying through the trees. So you're looking at evidence of a flood, right? And this is really the key thing when you're doing this and you're digging this up. You're looking for this kind of evidence. So a reminder to everybody. We're going to have a little break in a second and have a look and see if there's any questions come through before I do my little segment. But a reminder to people that you can get the evidence news. I've printed mine out here so we could go through it this evening, but you can get it completely for free. It comes through to your inbox. Just go to creationresearch.net, sign up to it. It gives you not only updates about what we've been doing, there's some of the great stuff we've been doing about Jurassic Ark, there's some stuff about some of the new resources we've got, some nice research about the Isle of Wight down on the bottom there. So it gives you nice up-to-date information about what we've been doing, but also really up-to-date research and evidence. So we've discussed two of them tonight, the stuff from Tanzania and the footprints, and the stuff about the Italian dinosaurs. But both of these things really have a strong connection to the way that people automatically believe or automatically accept the millions of years before actually even looking at where the evidence leads. I mean, in both of these cases, right, with the footprints we were discussing earlier, that there was no way that they could possibly be humans because, well, they knew that these rocks were 2.5 odd million years old, so there's no way that they could possibly be humans. And so because they've already decided that, they then dismiss any evidence that they are humans. It's the same with the dinosaur fossils, right? The fact that these are perceived to be millions of years old, they ignore the fact that there's massive evidence of a huge flood at the time. So we're going to have a little bit of a look in a moment as to where did this idea of millions of years come from, what's some of the history behind that, and see if there are any questions spring out of that. We probably won't be doing our full program, and sometimes we go on for a couple of hours. We probably won't be going on for the 2 hours tonight, but hopefully you enjoyed this little sort of discussion as we go. But we'll go for a little bit further and have a look at some of the history of geology. But before we do that, let's have a look. Let's see who's in the chat. Lots of people in the chat tonight, as always. Good to see you all, everybody. Let's see if we've got any questions. George wants to know what's Sam's excuse for not being here. Family matters, I think, is the right answer. I spoke to Sam just a little bit earlier. His family have come down to visit him and his wife, so he's busy with them for the evening. They sort of live a couple of hours drive away, so it's nice for them to come down and see him. So Sam's not here because he's got family visiting. John's not here because he's had a huge journey. So there's just a few reasons. Let's see, have we got any other questions down here? Let's see if we can pick any up. Sam normally keeps all these up to date for me. Here's a question. Right, there's a question just come down here. What's this? This is from Tony. Do you have an official ministry website to read everything if you don't want to receive your ministry newsletter already due to having lots to read already? Right. Yes, the place to go, Tony, and everybody else who's interested in this, let's put a website up here for you. It's creationresearch.net. That's our international website. From there, you can click to all of our other kind of sub websites, if you like, which is where we put all our information up. So everything that gets published in the Creation Research News also goes into our fact file website. Now, it's got its own website. It is here, creationfactfile.com. But if you go to our main website, creationresearch.net, you can just click on the button fact file. It'll take you straight through to there, and you can see all of the recent up-to-date stuff. You can search through it for any topic that you like. There's masses and masses of content up there because it's everything that we put out in the evidence news. Also linked from creationresearch.net is the askjohnmackay.com site. This is actually one that you oversee, Diane. Do you want to give us a bit of a background as to what's happening at the Ask John Mackay site?
Yes, that started off many years ago when we started communicating electronically. People would write in and ask questions, and we started just answering them as part of the newsletter. And then we decided, no, we'll actually set up a separate website and archive the questions, because if one person has a question about a particular topic, it usually indicates that a whole lot of other people do want to hear our answers. And also there's a facility there where you can, if your question has not been answered, you can just search the site for different topics. You can put in a question. Now, it's not a chat site. We take the questions and we'll try and work out good answers to them. Sometimes, if they're a bit technical, we'll send them off to people who have technical expertise in sort of physics or archaeology or whatever. And so your question won't be answered straight away, but it will be taken seriously, I can assure you. Absolutely, we'll do some background research, put in an answer. Now, if you're interested in the ministry news in terms of what we've been digging up at Jurassic Ark or our experiments with rapid rock layers and rapid coal formation, that is all on the main site. So you can go to that main site, creationresearch.net, and you will see links to the Jurassic Ark experiments and the rapid stalactite experiments and things like that. So you can just search for those And there are a whole
Absolutely.
series of articles. You can follow the progress from when we first started doing research into rapid stalactites and rapid rock formation. And we're doing some interesting stuff on rapid coal and oil formation now with dead fish and clay and other such interesting things. Plus what we've been digging up at Jurassic Ark. So, and because they're very pictorial things, so lots of good photos to see. So just go to that main site, and there you'll find that's our own research. The fact file is where we trawl the scientific news and we report what's been going out in the mainstream news with our comments about it and some biblical explanation for people.
Yeah.
So
And
two different good resources there for
yeah,
ministry
definitely.
news.
Absolutely. And you will also find links on our main website to our UK sites. Now, our
Yes.
UK sites have been fairly quiet over the past year, but we've got some big stuff happening in the next year. So do keep an eye out. And we are now we've got Sam on board who knows all this stuff that I don't know about computers and websites. We want to have regular updates going out on there as well. So there's lots that you can find out. I mean, the best thing to do really, if you can, is to get signed up to the Creation newsletter, but there are plenty of other ways that you can keep up to date with what we're doing on our Facebook, on YouTube. We try and do a ministry update every time we do creation conversations as well. So there's lots and lots of stuff going on. So yeah, do keep an eye out, and there should be plenty of information. In fact, Diane, because we've been having trouble communicating because for some reason your inbox doesn't like my emails and stuff. So this is actually the first time you all have heard of this. So do excuse me with that. But we actually got sent through a question specifically to me based off of one of my talks that I did with Standing for Truth not too long back about kinds and animal kinds and stuff like that, and sort of definitions. So I spoke to John about it, and he suggested that we sort of do a joint answer for that. So now that we've established contact, I'll have to send you the full question. It's quite a detailed question, and I think it's a very good question as well. So
Good.
we should work on that together, and hopefully that'll be out at some point in the future. So we do try and get some good up-to-date stuff out there, and very thoroughly researched. We have a whole, you kind of see on the forefront, it's like John and myself, and then quite often you have Diane yourself come in and do stuff, and this kind of forefront of people, or sort of the public front of creation research. But in the background, we have a whole host of scientists and researchers and people from all over the planet that God has blessed us with, who can impart both their wisdom and their research and their knowledge to us in these questions. So yeah, some really great stuff out there. Keep up to date and keep following us. All right, well, I'll do a short presentation now, because if you remember, we've been talking today about the creation research news, and the two main evidence pieces in there have been the human footprints and been the two new dinosaurs found from Italy. And in both of these, we noticed a little theme, the fact that the millions of years were accepted before any evidence was actually even considered. It was just accepted, this is true, and of course that's going to change the way that you view your evidence. Most apparent at the time, at the point of the human footprint report, because these are clearly human footprints, yet they are supposedly far too old to be human footprints, so they just ignored any evidence of them being human footprints, and at one point in time tried to argue that they were bears. And we spoke about that, and really there's no evidence of them being bears, and even the scientists, the evolutionists themselves, are now admitting that. But where did this idea of millions of years come from? Because a lot of people think perhaps Charles Darwin, a lot of people think perhaps evidence, and there's a name out there called Charles Lyell, which a lot of people have heard of, but it even goes much further back than Charles Lyell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen now. Let me just get this up to presentation, and I'll share my screen. I've got a few little slides to go through, and it should be a little bit of an interesting ride, just to kind of see how this all fits together and get a sort of a bit of a perspective from history as well, really. So hopefully you can all see my my slides up there like that. There we go. Fossil and
Yes,
geology
that's
history, it
good.
says. It goes back further than you think. Now, this is something that this is actually part of a big presentation that I'm putting together. It's part of an even bigger project because I would like to eventually produce a book on this. How many years down the line that is, I don't know, because we're charging all over the place and very, very very, very mad at the moment with all the projects. But this is a little taster, right? A little teaser. And I think, in fact, it'd be good to do an entire creation conversations just on this. But let's have a
Oh,
look
yes.
how we can kind of take it back, if you like. So fossil and geology history, it goes back further than you think. And the key phrase we're going to be talking about is the present is the key to the past. This is the catchphrase which was used really by Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was the mentor of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, of course, is accredited to really popularizing a certain theory of evolution. There were lots of different theories about evolution and ideas and thoughts about it before Charles Darwin, but he was the one who's really accredited with popularizing it. Okay, we need to go and start off our journey in deep time and antiquity. Deep time, by the way, is a reference to the millions of years. It's what's known as the millions of years. Where did this idea of millions of years come from? Where did this idea of deep time come from? It actually started in antiquity. Antiquity, of course, referring to the ancient cultures. And you can see I've got 3 ancient cultures down there: the Sumerians, the Babylonians, and the Hindus. So let's have a look at each one of these individually. We start off with the Sumerian king list. Now, this is a real list. It's actually listed in both. There's examples of this in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and examples of this in the the British Museum. So a well documented tablet, and it records these 10 kings. Now, these 10 kings can actually be correlated with the Bible, because these 10 kings were supposed to have lived before the Great Flood. And of course, if you read in your Bible, you'll find that there are 10 pre-flood patriarchs. And another interesting correlation between the two of them is that both the pre-flood kings of the Sumerian king list and the pre-flood patriarchs are both recorded of having lived a very long time, in sometimes up to the realm of close to 1,000 years. And of course, we know Methuselah, the oldest man of record, documented in scripture, lived up to 969. Adam lived to 930, and so on and so forth. Now, this was all well and good until later on you ended up having the Assyrians come along. The Assyrians came along, and of course, they had to prove that they were more important than the Sumerians that had come before them. And so they actually took this Sumerian king list, which was based on real history that was also recorded in the Bible, and they ended up extending it to a much, much older period to prove that they were there first and they were more important, right? So it was interpreted by Berosus. Berosus was the chief priest of Marduk. Marduk was the chief god of the Babylonians, and it was interpreted by this chief priest Berosus to cover a reign of 432,000 years between creation and the flood. And this was added as part of Babylonian cosmological history. Now, the Babylonians worked on a sexagesimal system. That means multiples of 60. So you will see in all of these cases, all of these figures will be multiples of 60. When you move on to the Babylonians kind of structure, in the Neo-Babylonian Empire, they claimed that an additional 1,680,000 years had occurred prior to the Sumerian king list, right? So there was this an additional over 1.5 million years prior to the Sumerian king list, then the several thousand years during the Sumerian king list, and then there was a great flood. And then from the time of the flood to Alexander the Great, he argued that there was 36,000 years. He predicted another 12,000 years of history, which brought the total cosmos to 2,160,000 years, which is a multiple of 60. It's that sexagesimal system. So you see, instantly you've gone from real history, recorded history that's also recorded in scripture, to suddenly being this ridiculously long. I mean, hey, we're already in the millions of years. And it was simply a a ploy really to not only tie in their history with their belief system, right, the beliefs of the sexagesimal system, the pagan system, but also to prove that they were more important than anybody else. Skip forward in time, and you'll find that both the Babylonians and the Sumerians were heavy influences on the Hindu cosmology. In fact, Alexander the Great really introduced not only the way that the Hindus think, but also the caste system that is there. In fact, that actually ties back to our Origin of the Races kind of program that you can find out. Go and check that out online. You'll find that Hindu cosmology was greatly affected by the Sumerian and the Babylonian, both theology and philosophy, and they indeed adopted this pagan sexagesimal system, right? Multiples of 60. But they extended the history from millions now to billions or even trillions of years, right? They simply incorporated a regeneration philosophy. They used this kind of idea of the present is the key to the past. As it happens now, it always has happened and it always will happen. And they argued that the cosmos was represented by the god Brahma, which you can see a depiction of in the painting behind, and his lifespan was 311,040 billion years. Right, so like 3 point something trillion years. Now we're getting onto the ridiculous kind of level, right? But do you see, this is talking about millions, then billions, and now trillions of years, long before Charles Darwin, long before Lyell. This is not a new idea. And then you end up at the Greeks. Now, the Greeks were also affected by both Babylonian and Hindu philosophy, which you can see in their pagan system, right? But then they began to reject this kind of pagan idea, and they began to reject this sort of theological philosophy of many gods, and began to adopt a naturalistic philosophy, right? Based off of those pagan ideas, but the idea that life could spontaneously arise from nowhere. The idea that there was kind of natural selection that happened, and these gave rise to what they called hopeful creatures that had a better chance of living than others, and the others would die off. They kind of have this whole idea of evolution really, millennia before Charles Darwin did, and it was also a very racist theory of evolution, because the Greeks believed that they had evolved out of the slime. However, they believed that they had evolved out of better quality slime than the Jews had evolved out of, right? So it's a very racist theory of evolution, even all the way back here at the time of the Greeks. They had this early primordial soup idea to explain the origin of life. Natural selection was there in their philosophies, based on these hopeful creatures would arise and take life forward. So long time before Charles Darwin, you have evolution. Now, the Greeks heavily influenced not only the Romans, but also most of the Western world. So you'll find their thinking, particularly in medicine, but also in their philosophies, greatly affected down throughout history. But the one thing they particularly influenced was actually the French revolutionary thinkers. Now, the French revolutionary thinkers had a problem. They did not like the monarchy. However, back then, the monarchy was appointed by God, right? That's what you believe, that God had appointed a king or a queen to be in charge. So to question the monarchy would be to question God, and you could not do that. What was the revolutionary thinkers' solution? Easy, we get rid of God. Get rid of God, that means there's no divine appointment of kings and queens, therefore we can get rid of the monarchy and we can chop their heads off. Simples, right? And so they said, well, how are we going to get rid of God? They took inspiration from the Greeks' naturalistic philosophers to say, well, if life can arise from nowhere, there's no need for a God. If just things like natural selection and whatnot can just happen by themselves, there's no need for a God. Excellent, we've solved the problem. Let's go and chop some French heads off, right? Now, wherever the French go, you know that the French will be doing the opposite of what the English do. And whatever the French do, you always know that the Scottish are not going to be very far behind, right? So you'll find the first influence that was really introduced to Britain about this kind of return to the Greek idea, bringing the influence of the pagan philosophies, bringing the influence of the evolutionary philosophies, filtered down through Scotland, through James Hutton and through Charles Lyell. So you started off with the philosophers, names that may be recognizable: de Maillet, Buffon, Voltaire, and they argued things like fossils are inorganic or fake. The flood, Noah's flood, is impossible. The Earth has got to be at least 2 billion years old. Life just arises naturally, and this pagan idea influenced James Hutton, who introduced a process called uniformitarianism, which really is the present is the key to the past, right? All of geology has to be explained by natural processes that are occurring today. And I've put my little note there: no science has actually happened yet. Nobody's actually gone out to go and see where the evidence leads. They've all based their ideas initially upon a rejection of real history and this attempt to try and incorporate their beliefs in with their ideas about the age of the earth, right? Their religious philosophies incorporate it into their ideas about the age of the earth. And it usually has something to do with proving that they're better than the guys next door, right? So it's, again, a racist kind of upbringing. Anyway, you now get this thing of, right, we've now gone past this rejection of real history. We've gone past all this introduction. Now it is a deliberate attempt at removing God out of people's thinking. Then comes on the scene another Scotsman, Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was a mentor to Charles Darwin. Charles Lyell used Hutton's principles of uniformitarianism and really popularized it in his books, The Principles of Geology. This is actually the diagram from the Natural History Museum in London, big prestigious university museum, and you see what he's saying there: the present is the key to the past. Now, you will notice one thing straight away: that is directly the opposite of what Scripture teaches. Scripture teaches that the past is the key to the present. What happened in the past is the key to why we're in the mess we're in today. What happened in the past is the key to how we gain salvation through Jesus Christ who died, right? The past is the key to the present according to the Bible. However, according to Charles Lyell, the present is the key to the past. Complete opposite, right? And his argument is that you can explain all of geology from natural processes that we see today. Of course, Charles Lyell, as I already mentioned, mentored Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin said that half of my ideas come straight out of Lyell's brain and he's never given the credit. You see, what Charles Lyell did is he opened the door for Darwin to walk through. Once the world is millions of years old, then all of a sudden you have a legitimate reason for evolution. Let me give you an example. A creation research field trip in the rocks that we now call Ordovician. Ordovician are named after a Celtic tribe that used to live in Wales, the Ordovici tribe. Nothing to do with millions of years, everything to do with the people who used to live on the rocks that we now study. Now, we're leading a field trip here, but Charles Darwin and Charles Lyell both actually went to this location. And they found just what we were finding on that very same day: fossil snails. You see the fossil snail on the left, you see the modern snail shell on the right. Living fossils for sure. Now, Lyell was walking along collecting these fossils and he said to Darwin, okay, what do you think is a reasonable length of time for one type of snail to evolve into a different type of snail? And Charles Darwin said, I think that 20 million years would suffice. So Lyell went along, counting all the different types of snails that you can find, put them all together, and all of a sudden, if each species of snail took 20 million years to evolve into the next species, all of a sudden the Ordovician was 240 million years old, according to Lyell and Darwin. Just like that. Dates plucked out of thin air. Of course, you'll be hard pushed to find a geologist who believes that the Ordovician is 240 million years old today. They believe it's older than that, but it just shows that these dates were plucked purely out of thin air. And what was the agenda behind all of this? Well, Charles Lyell's key concept was that evolution, anti-catastrophism, was based on this idea that you can tell the age of the rock simply by the fossils that are in it. The present is the key to the past. Once you establish a very old Earth, Darwin could walk in and say, well, if the Earth really is that old, then all of a sudden the fossils that you find in the Earth must be very millions of years old, and each type of fossil gave rise to a different type of fossil. What was Charles Lyell's motives for aging the Earth? Well, he actually tells you, quote unquote, he says, I conceived the idea 5 or 6 years ago that if ever the Mosaic geology, that's flood geology, that's geology based on the Bible, could be set down without giving offense, it would be in an historical sketch. In other words, change history and you get rid of the Bible. Stephen Gould even freely admitted this. He said Charles Lyell was a lawyer by profession and his book was one of the most brilliant briefs ever published by an advocate. Lyell relied upon true bits of cunning to establish his uniformitarian views as the only true geology. He said, in fact, the catastrophists, that's those who believed in Noah's flood, were much more empirically minded than Lyell. In fact, he even admits that the geologic record requires catastrophes. What's the real problem here? There it is there. The present is the key to the past. It simply isn't. It simply doesn't work. The Bible says that the present is not the key to the past. The Bible says that the past is the key to the present. So note very well, any dating method, such as carbon-14, the speed of light, and how they got here in that time, radioactive dates, chalk or limestone formation, or any of this geological history based on Lyell's uniformitarian assumption, will always contradict the biblical account of the 6-day creation and flood, simply because, hey, he was trying to get rid of the Bible from the beginning. He wanted to get rid of Mosaic geology based on the Bible. In fact, you can go one step further. Lyell said, quote unquote, my aim in promoting uniformitarian geology is to free the science from Moses. Moses? Oh, he's attributed to writing the first 5 books of the Bible, right? I mean, get rid of Moses and you get rid of what? The creation of mankind, a special creation. You get rid of the fall of mankind. Mankind is a sinner and needs a savior. You get rid of the judgment of mankind and the destruction of the earth at the time of Noah's flood. You get rid of the history of mankind at the time of the Tower of Babel. And you get rid of the law of God. Get rid of those 5 things which are found in the first 5 books of the Bible, and all of a sudden you have no need for a God in the slightest. You see, if Charles Lyell had rocked up and said, hey, I want to get rid of Christianity, most people at the time would have gone, not happening. But he was clever. He simply wanted to free science from Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible, and he has achieved it very well. Note well, though, it is not the evidence that disagrees with the biblical record of a 6-day creation and Noah's flood over the last 6,000 to 7,000 years. It's simply the opinions of men who willfully set out to reject and replace the word of God. Lyell simply replaced Genesis, Darwin then rewrote it. There's Lyell's most famous disciple, the Charles Darwin robot that you can go and see in the museum. Oh, by the way, that robot didn't make itself. It was designed by somebody fairly clever. Somebody who was able to put all the bits together in the right way. Even Charles Darwin's robot screams evidence of design. I'm going to finish with this final point here. If you take the pagan-inspired philosophy that Lyell and Darwin promoted as your authority, then of course you're going to have issues accepting the Bible's version of events. But you need to realize it's not an issue of evidence, it's an issue of who or what your authority actually is. You need to start seeing things God's way. Let this mind be in you that was also in Christ. Philippians 2, verse 5. Make sure you're seeing things through God's sight. I'm going to escape and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Lovely stuff. Let's have a look and see if we've had any more questions come through. I think we should wrap it up fairly soon there, Diane, unless there's anything else
yes.
to cover. But hopefully that was a little interesting snippet. And it is just a snippet, right? There's so much more information that we could do. In fact, I got a new book come through just a little while back. It was actually a republish. I'm trying to see if I can see it up here, and I can't actually see it. It's basically looking at... here we go. It's a republished book from quite a number of years back, from the sort of early 20th century, sort of the 1918, I think it was. No, sorry, even older than that, 1896. It's a reprint. It's called From the Greeks to Darwin, and I've been reading it as research, not only for this but also for the book that I'm trying to write, and it is really fascinating because it shows you how much the Greeks actually believed about things like evolution. It's a
Yes.
not an unknown topic, this that we're talking about.
Mm.
It's well documented. It's just you'll hardly ever see it in the media and in the universities because it is fairly controversial. So there's something there, but we need to do a whole program on it. I think that'd be really good.
Yes, particularly on the influence of Lyell on Darwin with all of that background information, because until that, the idea of those long ages was firmly cemented in Darwin's mind. That
Mm,
just opened up the world for him, and
absolutely.
he admitted that. In
Yeah,
fact, in his origin book, he said, "Look, if you don't believe in these long ages, you might as well shut this book." Uh,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
So yes, that's a very big topic, but one that's worth exploring.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. Well, that's been an interesting little delve through some stuff. We've still got a few people with us, so thank you very much for sticking through us to the end. We've gone sort of just over an hour, and
Mm.
I remember back to when we only used to do half an hour programs, and that's been a long while since we've done a half an hour program, but there still is a good length of time. Hopefully, you've enjoyed it. Do you
Yes.
remember? Go and sign up to the Creation Research Evidence News. Really fascinating delve through some of these things, and really worthwhile getting signed up. It keeps you up to date with what we're doing with creation research as well. Remember the Starboy book. We have limited amounts of these in the UK. They're already selling fairly fast, so go and grab them now. They can ship to the USA. They can ship around Europe and stuff as well. Go to the Australian site to order them from Australia, but we've got limited edition, and you also need to buy them soon if you want them in time for Christmas. And that goes the same for all of the other Christmas packs that we've put together. Go and check those
Yes,
out.
they
Check
are
out the
available in
websites.
Australia. Mm.
Yeah, they are available in Australia. You'll find links to everything on the main website, creationresearch.net, and you'll see UK shop, you'll see Australian shop, you'll see
Mm. Mm.
all the fact files, and the ask site, and everything is all nice and simple on the main website. A question come through from Tony again. The book From Greeks to Darwin, where can you get it from, please? Right. This I ordered online. You might just have to put it in From the Greeks to Darwin. It's by a guy named Henry Fairfield Osborne. You can just see it up on the screen there. Henry Fairfield Osborne, if you want to pause this later and look it up. It's by a classic reprint series where they reprint old books and sometimes some very random books as well. But there's some useful things in there that you can't get as a print anymore. But I just found it online. I've known about it for a while because it's been referred to elsewhere. But I found it just as it's a second-hand copy, and you can tell that by all the
Mm.
scribbles and everything in it that I didn't do. So there we go. Something to look up for. So anyway, I think we should call it a night there. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. It's been fascinating. Diane, are there any last words before we sign off?
Yes, always think about the worldview that people are coming from when they're reporting the scientific news. You can't separate them. So that's why we trawl the normal scientific news, and we try and help people to look at what was discovered and what's the story they're telling about it, and how does it fit into the biblical history. And all of a sudden, things fall into place when you look at things from the biblical history point of view. So know what scripture says, and don't be afraid to check out the science, because that's what we're
Absolutely.
doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Catch you later, folks. It's been great. Good to see you all again. God bless. We'll catch you next week. And next week, by the way, share it. We'll get the link up for it very, very soon because I'm a bit more organized this week. So, it'll be a Christmas special, and we've got some really fascinating stuff to go through. So make sure you sign in next week. It's going to be a Christmas special. We're going to have a break the week after that because that's basically Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, depending on where you are around the world. But we'll be back again after that. But yeah, check out next week. It's going to be a good one. Catch you later, folks. God bless. See you later.
Yes, God